Wow, like last session on the last day, and we still have people that are awake. That is fantastic. So yes, congratulations. We made it to like the last session on the last day of the conference. I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like this guy. Maybe you feel like this guy too, either because your brain is full, or you partied too hard last night, or like me, you woke up at 4 in the morning and then couldn't go back to sleep because apparently my brain hates the rest of my body and wants it to feel terrible. But either way, congratulations. Thank you for being awake and alert, and hope a good audience. I already can tell you guys are going to be a great audience. So let's talk about Firebase. As you may have heard, Firebase is a suite of integrated products designed to help you develop your app, or grow a user base, and earn money. Maybe we've mentioned that before. Yay! And we've been kind of calling it a suite, but for a lot of these talks, I feel like we've generally been talking about Firebase's features in isolation. And for this session, what I'd like to do is actually kind of show you some of the cool tricks that you can do when you have some of the various features of the new Firebase platform all working together in a few hypothetical scenarios, and a presentation I like to call 5 neat tricks you can do with the new Firebase platform. So let's look at those now. We're going to start off with trick number 1. I'm with the band, or dynamic links plus notifications plus Firebase Cloud Messaging plus Firebase Analytics equals notification goodness. And let's start off by talking about our brand new ticket app, Ticket Picker. They're the quicker ticket picker. And they're the hot new way for you to get tickets for concerts, baseball games, and what have you. And they've decided, as sort of a good little marketing ploy, as a way to draw users into their app, they're going to set up a companion site, right? This is a site where you can read like news and gossip and tour information and get some tour dates about your favorite bands. And sort of as a way to draw people into their app, they decide on all these pages they're going to add in a nice little button that says, hey, if you're interested in getting tickets for the Rolling Stones, then why don't you click on this button and try out our app. By the way, I would like to point out that it is incredibly difficult to draw a scone. I know this just looks like sort of a really sad pancake, but that's why I'm a developer advocate and not an artist. But anyway, so this kind of sounds like a situation for dynamic links. If you know what Firebase dynamic links are, they're basically mobile deep links that work the way you want them to. So basically with one link that we can put on our site, we can either take the user to the iOS or the Android version of their app if they have it installed. And if they don't have the app installed, we can take them to the App Store or the Play Store, depending on the platform. More importantly, if the user had to install our app first, Firebase Dynamic Links can retrieve that original link context. It can remember what link the user clicked on to get them into the app in the first place, so that we can actually deliver the user a first-time experience that is relevant to the link they clicked on. So rather than just showing a boring old homepage, we know that they installed our app because perhaps they're interested in Rolling Stones and getting tickets, and maybe we can show them or information that's relevant that way. So the link to try out to get into our app would probably look a little like this. And I can kind of break it down for you if you're not super familiar with Firebase Dynamic Links, and you probably aren't because we just announced it 2 days ago. First, we'd add in these entries for the appropriate Play and App Store IDs, as well as your iOS bundle identifier. This basically lets us know, which place in the Play Store or the App Store to redirect the user if they don't have the app installed. We're also going to add in these UTM tracking tags. And if you don't know what they are, they're basically sort of a hierarchical way of representing any kind of marketing campaign. So you've got like your Uber Spring 2016 campaign. And then within that, you have your various sources like the companion website or maybe an email blast and that sort of thing, and various content and medium. You can kind of break it down in different ways. Different people like to do this in different ways. And all that information will get captured in Firebase Analytics when the user clicks on this deep link. And then we have the link parameter itself. And this is the information that gets passed into your app when it first opens up. And in this case, we've decided that we're going to capture the band that the user was browsing when they decided to click on this link. So we know that the featured band here happens to be the Rolling Stones, and that we'll be able to realize when we sort of process this URL. And so by analyzing this link information, when we first open up the app, instead of our boring old sign-in page, our app can analyze that link parameter, and it'll say, OK, the user was interested in our app because they were looking at a page for the Rolling Stones, so maybe we should show them some relevant info, right? And then we can show the user a bunch of Rolling Stones tour dates when they first open up our app instead of that sort of blank sign-in screen. And this is important. Like, the user has said, I am willing to go ahead and install your app because I'm super interested in this data, so why not make sure that they can get that data that they're interested in right away? And so this is dynamic links, and maybe you know about this if you saw our other presentation. But we can also do a lot more with this incoming link and knowing sort of what that featured band was. For instance, our app can automatically subscribe the user to the Rolling Scones Firebase Cloud Messaging topic. If you don't want to know what topics are, they're basically ad hoc groups that any client can subscribe to on the cloud messaging server. So basically, we can tell the cloud messaging server, please send this message to any client that has subscribed themselves to this topic, the Rolling Scones or any other band. Firebase Cloud Messaging has kept track of which clients have subscribed themselves to that topic, and it can send the information off to all those devices without your having to keep track of it in your own database on your server somewhere. So when the Rolling Scones decide, hey, we're going to start a new tour and we're going to make some new ticket sales available, you can schedule a future message through Firebase notifications. You can see here that in addition to sending a message right away, we can schedule a message to be sent at a particular time. We can schedule messages to be sent at a particular time in the user's specific time zone if we want. In this case, because tickets are going on sale at 9 a.m. All across the world globally, we can make sure that that notification gets sent out globally so that everyone has a chance to get those tickets before they sell out. And then you can see that we are sending these these set of notifications to devices that have subscribed to the Rolling Scones topic. And then we can also capture conversion events here. So various events in Firebase Analytics that are super important to your app, like being able to purchase a ticket. You can tell Firebase Analytics, let's make these conversion events. These are events that we really care about. And so you can then track whether a notification has led a user to complete one of these events. And this is really important for determining whether your notifications are are they effective or are they spammy? If it turns out that a lot of people are receiving the notification, but very few people are opening them, and very few people out of that group are actually going ahead and completing a ticket purchase, well, maybe it's spammy. On the other hand, if you've targeted your notifications correctly, then the percentage of people who get the notification, open it, and then go ahead and complete a purchase will be much higher. And that's sort of a good way of judging whether or not these notifications are effective. And gosh, this incoming band, this also seems like a pretty good starting value for like a user property of the user's favorite band. Maybe we can change that on the app later, but this seems like a pretty good starting point. And then we can do a lot of reports in Firebase Analytics based on the favorite bands of our users, right? So we can take a look at any report, like the number of people that said, why, yes, I'm interested in reviewing this app. And we can filter that by various user properties, including their favorite band. So we can take a look and see, for everybody who listed the Rolling Scones as their favorite band, well, how many of them went ahead and decided that they were OK reviewing my app? So we can get a better idea of how these different fans of different bands behave. And if we say, wow, we really need more people reviewing our app, and it turns out that fans of the Rolling Scones are more likely to review our app than fans of W2, they're saying a lot about filling out tax forms, we can figure that out in Firebase Analytics. And then because we used all of these UTM tags to record all the deep link info, we can evaluate the performance of the entire companion site, right? We can basically look at all of the companion site users and see how they behave. Not just, did they click on these links to get into our app, but are they more or less likely to perform these important conversion actions like buying a ticket, like subscribing to our newsletter, like signing up for the premium service, like sharing the app with our friends. So when our CEO comes by and says, gosh, we seem to be spending an awful lot of money on this companion site, is it worth it? We can actually have the data to back it up. And we can say, why, yes, it's not only getting us users, which we know, but we can also decide that it's getting us users that are valuable to us because they are buying tickets or sending the app to their friends. And maybe it's because that nice deep link experience is giving them a better experience and they're more interested in our app in the first place. So that's an awful lot that you can do just by adding in one dynamic link into your banners. So I'm going to move on to trick number 2, birds of a feather, or Firebase authentication plus the real-time database plus storage equals some group photo sharing. This one gets into some kind of crazy rules here, but stick with me. So this is our fun bird watching app, Birdie Hunt. And they've decided they're going to add a new feature for their users to be able to share photos of birds that they found with the public. Like I found a really good picture of a chickadee, and I take it and I say, hey, everybody, check out this picture. And maybe everyone can ooh and ah over it. So clearly, this seems like a good use case for Firebase storage, right? That's a place where we can store all of our members' photos in the cloud. That's what it was made for, is storing large blobs of data. Apparently, people used to like base64 this data and stick it in the real-time database before. Hey, all right, guilty. So do this now. It's better. It's way better. Now, when we do that, when we basically add when we upload a file to storage, in the completion handler, what you're going to get back is some metadata. And among that metadata, one of the most important things you're going to get is a download URL to that file that you just uploaded. It's basically the URL of the file plus some tokens that you can revoke later if you need to. But this is what you're going to have to be able to download that photo. And then we can store these URLs in the Firebase database, right? We can create an album photos object, and under there we can create a different object for each different album. And within there we can create various photos with like the name and the URL. And just like that, people can kind of see our photo albums, which sounds great. But it turns out, I didn't know this, bird watching groups, very cutthroat, very competitive, and they didn't want other bird watching groups to see the photos that they took. They only wanted to share it with other people in their bird watching group. So who knew? But we can still do that, partly by taking advantage of Firebase sign-in, or Firebase auth, I should say, which allows you to sign in your user from a number of different providers, right? We have Google and Facebook and Twitter and GitHub, as well as letting your user provide their own email and password, and we handle that for you, so you don't have to deal with storing passwords on your end. So when we use Firebase auth, what we get back is a unique ID for each user in our app, no matter how they've signed in, right? You sort of get back a consistent Firebase user object that has its own unique ID that you're sure aren't going to have like name collisions across the different sign-in providers, which is nice. Now you can take that and you can store basically the members who can view the various albums in our album members sort of album ID section. We can basically stick our various user IDs into this object and maybe list some administration roles. Some people are owners, some people are editors, some people are viewers. So once we get that in there, well, now we need to write some rules. We need to tell the Firebase database, OK, for someone to see this photo here, their user ID must exist in the corresponding album object. Does that make sense? All right. So how do we do that? We do that with these rules, which I know look a little complicated at first. But if you break it down, what you can actually see is basically we're just going up the tree a little bit. We're saying, OK, for any object in the album photos object, so to go up the tree a little bit and go down and find the corresponding album members object. From there, if there is a child that has the same user ID as the user who's currently signed in, well, then they're allowed to read this album. And if it turns out that the value of that object happens to be editor or owner, then they're allowed to write into this album. And that's basically all we're saying here with this code. But wait, how do we know how to put those user IDs in there in the first place, right? Well, we can actually have rules for that as well. Let's say we want to have a way for members to request that they join a particular album, right? I say, yeah, I would like to view this album. Please let me in. And so we can create an album joiners object where people can add in their own user IDs so that they can make these requests. And then the owner of any particular album has the power to remove people from the album joiners object and put them into the album members object. So let's look at the rules needed to do that. First, we need to say that anybody can add their own user ID to a joiners object. It's basically just a request to join, and sure, anyone can do that. Doesn't mean it'll get approved, but anyone can. So we would do that with this rule. Basically, within album joiners, for any arbitrary album, for any arbitrary user ID, you are allowed to write your own user ID. So that's basically all we're saying here. Next up, we need to say that anybody, well, basically that we could say that if you want to alter anything in the album joiners object, besides the process of writing your own user ID, well, you need to be the album owner. And so we kind of do that using this same sort of let's go up the tree and then down the tree to the corresponding album members object and look in there and see if the signed-in user is listed as the owner. And if you are, then congratulations, you can read and write to this album joiners object. And then we also want to say, well, album owners can alter anything in their own album members object, which is actually a much simpler rule. We just say, well, if you're listed there as an owner, then you can write in here. And then finally, for brand new albums, we'll say that anybody can create a brand new album as long as they list themselves as the owner. And that's the kind of thing you can do here. Basically, we're saying you can create a brand new album members object as long as it doesn't already exist, and you are listing yourself as the owner. So maybe your first reaction upon seeing all of this is, well, I'm going to give up and just make my entire database world readable and writable, because this seems really kind of strange and weird. And it is. It's kind of strange and weird at first. I certainly wasn't able to figure this out without sort of having a Firebase engineer next to me. I know all of you don't have the advantage of having a Firebase engineer sitting next to you, but I can give you the next best thing, which is his phone number. This is Frank. He is totally willing to help out and answer questions. And I'm sorry? Oh, it's sarcasm. Oh, okay. Apparently that was not a sincere. I'm just going to move on. And instead, I'm going to say that you can get the next best thing, which is this cool tool that Firebase has, where you can basically pretend to sign in as any arbitrary user and then try and simulate any kind of read or write call. And what will happen is Firebase will go through all of the rules in its database and let you know which ones it's applying, whether they evaluate to true or false, and then tell you whether this operation would have succeeded or not. So it's actually kind of cool. Like, that's how I was able to verify that all these rules on my slides were legit, was by sort of going through all of these simulated reads and writes and making sure that yes, someone can, an owner is allowed to remove somebody from the joiners list and so on. So I encourage you to give this a try. It's available. It's the UI has actually improved just a little bit as well. It's available in the database in this little button on the right that says, I forget what it says now, like experiments or something like that. So, because these rules, they are a little weird at first, but they're also incredibly powerful. And once you start playing around with them, they can also be kind of fun. And I know, security isn't supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be very serious and all of that. But, it's fun. It's kind of fun to play around with. So let's move on to trick number 3. We test in production, or using remote config plus Firebase crash reporting plus analytics plus notifications to turn disasters around. So let's revisit Ticket Picker. They're the quicker ticket picker, as you might recall. And one day, their CEO comes in and says, listen, I have this great idea for a new ticket auction feature, right? Instead of just kind of selling and buying tickets, we'll let people put their tickets up for auction. Everybody can bid, and whoever the highest bidder is will get the ticket, right? Doesn't this sound fantastic? It does sound fantastic. Well, I'm glad you agree, because I kind of told our investors we have it ready for them by next week. But don't worry, I have a plan. See, I've been analyzing all the work that we do when we write our code. Turns out, basically, it breaks down into 4 things here. We develop features, cool new features. We write unit tests. We add in some sweet animations, and then we compose some very funny release notes. Right now, we're doing a whole Calvin and Hobbes fan fiction thing. It's very popular. And so we sort of analyzed this stuff, and we found out that people love the features and the animations and the release notes, right? Totally fun, really interesting. But I realized writing unit tests, so boring. Like, I looked at all the time our engineers spend writing these, and not one good feature has come out of them. So here's the way we're going to get this feature done. Just skip writing unit tests, right? It takes up a bunch of time. There's no user-facing value, and I'm an organizational genius. Well, Karen from engineering was not super impressed. And while the CEO did decide to push forward with his whole no unit test plan, he did make one valuable concession, which is this. All right, let's roll it out gradually. So the first day, we'll kind of roll it out to a very small percentage of the population. And then, we'll kind of expand it. And maybe in a couple days, we'll go to 15%, and so on until the entire world is full of our red auction feature of goodness. So here's how they did it. Here's how you would do a gradual rollout using Firebase. First off, they added a ticket auction enabled value in Firebase remote config. So this is basically a value that you can read in from remote config that says, should I enable this auction? And what you can do in remote config is create conditions, certain groups of users for whom certain values apply. And one thing you can do with conditions is create random groups of users. So what they said is, we're going to create a ticket auction experiment condition, which will apply to 10% of the population, right? Or this can be whatever we want. We'll start with 10. And so basically, we'll set this value to true if they are in the ticket auction experiment, and otherwise, we'll set it to false. And because Karen is super paranoid, she said, you know what? Let's also suppress that review dialog for anybody that's in that experiment, because I'm not entirely sure we want to encourage reviews from people that are in this thing yet. I'm not super confident yet in our auction feature. And so that's something you can also do, pretty easily using remote config is, change when do you want to show that please review our app dialog to your users. So then in their code, it's pretty simple to use remote config to check whether or not to enable this feature. This is Swift. It looks pretty similar to most other languages. And then basically, you can also report back through Firebase Analytics the experiment type that the user is in by setting a user property. So we're going to create a user property called is this user in the auction experiment. And we'll set it to either 1 or 0 if they're in the auction. And then in Firebase Analytics, while we're at it, let's create an audience based on people for whom this experiment type is equal to true. So for anybody who has the user property of I am in this experiment, we will add them to a Firebase audience. And the way Firebase audiences work is they build up over time. This work is distributed to the client. And so as people start using the app and the client realizes that they are in this auction experiment, they will get added to this audience. So our app is updated, released to the world, and we decide to gradually turn on this feature by changing the percent in the experiment. It'll go from sort of 2% to like 10%, and then to 20%, and so on. And when we change these random values, don't worry, it's that same random group of 10% plus the next random group of 10. It doesn't pick an entirely different 20% of the population. And so we gradually roll it out to our users, and then we decide to see how things are going. So we go over and look on Firebase crash reporting, and oh my gosh, this is terrible. And in fact, if we look below, we can see that the biggest culprit here seems to be this method, start new auction. So apparently that might be the culprit. And even worse, we can go and break out our spending reports by this user property. And we can see that people who are now in the auction experiment aren't spending everything. And this is terrible. And our CEO goes to engineering and says, how could you have let this happen? And Karen sighs and says, don't worry, we got a plan. So first of all, we can use remote config to very quickly shut down the experiment. Right? We change this condition back to 0, and soon the auction disappears from everybody's app. More importantly, we have an audience full of everybody who is in this experiment, and we can apologize to them. And it's amazing how much goodwill you can gain when you apologize when you mess things up. Anyway, we can use Firebase notifications to send an apology to everybody who's in that audience, basically saying, hey, sorry, we've had some issues with our auctions. We've turned off this feature, and maybe as an added little bonus, here's a little coupon code or something in the notification. And because it's being targeted to just this audience, the other 80% of the population using the app isn't going to be like, what are they talking about? I've never even seen this auction thing. And again, this sort of thing can be really useful. It's sort of a good way of turning a negative experience into a positive one, and a way to kind of show that you care. So Karen once again saves the company, and everything is good with the world, for now. Stop coming up with ideas. They're all terrible. All right. Let's move on to issue number 4, or trick number 4, the Dreamy Boyz storefront. Or analytics plus AdWords plus remote config plus Firebase hosting equals some promotions to swoon over. So let's talk a little bit about Chat 'em Up. It's a fantastic new chat app that makes most of their money selling stickers in their in-app store. Well, now it just so happens that the lead biz dev person at Chat 'em Up is really good friends with the manager of the hot new boy band coming out of the UK, the Dreamy Boyz. So they're the hot new band with the hit new song, You Can't Debug My Love. So freaky looking boy band. And so anyway, they say, hey, you know what would be great? What if we had like a Dreamy Boyz branded section of our sticker shop, right? That would be fantastic. And so they go off and start negotiating deals and royalties and all that. We decide we want to make this thing a success as soon as it launches. So as early as we can, we're going to start creating a few audiences in Firebase Analytics. First, we'll kind of target their initial demographic, females in the UK. And then their second demographic, males in Switzerland over 55. I'll be honest, this one kind of took marketing by surprise, but there you go. And then while we're at it, let's also target our heavy sticker users. These are people who have purchased a sticker from our in-app sticker store, right? That's probably an audience we've created already because we care about them. Very, very clearly, the people that are going to most likely to purchase stickers in the future are people who have probably purchased stickers in the past. So this is definitely a group we want to kind of capture in a Firebase Analytics audience. So let's fast forward to a few months later. The deal is signed. We have our great new storefront. And we say, hey, that's fantastic. We got to get the word out about this. And so because we've connected Firebase and AdWords, we can use these audiences directly in our remarketing campaign. If you've done a remarketing campaign in AdWords, you might know that you're allowed to basically target specific remarketing lists. And these can be everybody who's ever used your app ever. But now that you can connect Firebase and AdWords, you can also target audiences that you have built up right within analytics. And that actually turns out to be really useful, right? Like, we can actually target just the people that have purchased stickers in our app before with remarketing campaigns. Or we can also target our women in the UK and our older Swiss men. And so those people will start to see remarketing ads designed to get them back into their app, where hopefully they'll be making some more purchases. It turns out we can also use remote config to display a welcome message to our sticker audience, right? We can also not only create conditions based on random groups of users or your device type or your country, but we can also target certain Firebase audiences. So we could add a welcome message for all our sticker purchasers to let them know about some recent new addition to our app. And honestly, this is a really good application for remote config, is any kind of message of the day feature, right? You can sort of immediately push out any new message that you want to send to your users using remote config. More importantly, with conditions, you can target just specific groups of users who you think might be interested in this. So not everybody is getting all these sort of message of the days all the time if they don't want them. And we can also do things, as long as we're using remote config, we can change the banner image for our sticker store so that it can be something special, again, for that group of users who have purchased stickers from us in the past. Maybe we say, instead of using whatever local image we would normally use on the device, let's grab something remotely. And so we can go from our boring old sticker shop banner to whatever you would call this. That's Evan. He's the rebel of the group. I hear he might also be a vampire. So. Anyway, we were going for smoldering, but I think we just ended up with tired, because that's what happens when you take pictures the week before I/O. Everyone looks tired. Anyway, but that's the kind of thing you can do with remote config. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed, but the URL for that fancy new banner image is being provided for us by Firebase hosting. And that's sort of the best place for you to put kind of static images and that sort of thing that you want to retrieve by using plain old HTTP calls. Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So yes, you may have noticed there's sort of two ways to retrieve images, right? You've got Firebase storage and Firebase hosting. Both are good. Generally speaking, you want to use Firebase storage for user-generated content, right? Images that your users have taken and uploaded, recordings, audio recordings, that sort of thing. For what I call read-only assets, like your website or images and data that you want your app to download later, hosting is much more appropriate. That kind of gets it out to the world across our CDN everywhere and makes it super fast and easier for you to download. So let's move on to trick number 5. Are you ready for this jelly? Or basically remote config plus dynamic links plus the Firebase database plus Firebase analytics for replays that matter. So let's talk about Jelly Matcher Gaiden, the latest match 3 puzzle game. The developers have decided they want to add a let's share my level feature or share my replay, so that if you've had a really great replay, you can send it off to your friends. They can try the exact same level as you, see if they can beat your score, and maybe even watch your replay later, right? Sounds like kind of a cool way of doing it. So again, this seems like a pretty obvious use case for dynamic links. Whatever email this app ends up generating and sending off, or whatever post or however we want to share this replay, we probably want that link to get into our app to be a dynamic link, right? So we can kind of click on that link. We'll take them into the app and immediately load up the level by analyzing that link parameter. And again, they don't have the app installed. Well, we can take them to the Play Store or the App Store. And yes, by the way, we could totally store all that replay information in the Firebase database. Seems like a really good place to put it. But there is one big question. So typically, if the user doesn't have the app installed, the default dynamic link process is to take users directly to the App Store or the Play Store and wait for them to install the app. But we also have another option when dealing with Firebase dynamic links. We can send people to a fallback page instead. This could be like a marketing page where we tell them a little more about the app and tell them how fantastic it is and get them excited about it before we then send them to the App Store, where they're given the option of whether to install it or not. And there's sort of advantages and disadvantages to both, right? The first way is one fewer click. You can immediately get right into the App Store or the Play Store. But the other way, maybe gives the user a little more context before we ask them to install something. So which is better? Well, this seems like a very good opportunity for an A/B test. And so that's also something we can do with remote config. We can set up a test condition like this, again, delivering to a random group of users. And this time, we'll kind of look at 50% of our users instead of doing a gradual rollout. So we can kind of do a true A/B test. And then we can set our value of replay uses marketing page to either be true or false, depending on whether the user is in this experiment. And then basically within whatever code we're going to be using to build out this dynamic link from the app, we can look and see, is this value true? If so, then let's add on these 2 extra parameters, the AFL and the IFL parameter, to our dynamic link, which basically tells, tells Firebase Dynamic Links what web page to send the user to instead. So for half of our users, the link they're going to share with their friends looks a little like this. It's a dynamic link without any fallback pages. And the other half will have a link that looks like this. It's basically the same link as before, but now we have these fallback page URLs specified. And again, with a little tiny bit of JavaScript, that marketing page that we then have that tells the user how fantastic this app is, and now don't you really want to go and install it? Well, when they click on that link to go ahead and install it, we can still kind of generate our own dynamic link so that when the user finally does open up that app, we've remembered through the entire process what that replay was and take our user right into that replay as soon as they start up the app. And how do we actually track this? How do we see which is successful? Probably the easiest way is just kind of adjust those UTM parameters that we talked about earlier. We can sort of create that for each link. And then we can start tracking conversion metrics. Like who made an in-app purchase based on did you visit the fallback page first, or were you taken there directly from the email? So not only can we see which users clicked on which links the most, but also see which users then stuck around and actually made a purchase and really got into it. Maybe the marketing page got you more psyched to actually try the app and stick with it, because chances are you're not going to win that replay if this is the first time you've ever tried the game. So that's valuable. And by the way, we don't need to stop with just kind of testing a single page or not, right? Like, it's very easy to kind of A/B/C test different pages. We can create conditions for 33% of our users and 66%, and then kind of set different options of which marketing page do we send people to, or maybe we don't send them to one at all. Again, based on all these conditions. And if we think about it, if this email content is being generated on our client, well, that has to come from somewhere too. So why not kind of use remote config to, again, test what emails we're going to send, and test what screenshot the app is going to put in there and what the button is going to say. All that stuff, again, fairly easy to set up and A/B test using remote config. So there you go. 5 ways you can use elements like storage and analytics and notifications and remote config and auth all together to make a more compelling app. Now, this might shock some of you, but these were somewhat contrived examples with fake companies. I know, right? Surprising. But probably some of this does apply to your situation, right? Maybe you have a companion site where you're trying to bring users into your app, and you want to make that a little more powerful. Or maybe you have a feature that you're not super confident in, and maybe you kind of want to try a gradual rollout first. Maybe you have your own set of deep links or sharing emails, and you want to A/B test that stuff. So think about it. Maybe a couple of these examples, they might not be exactly pertinent to your situation, but maybe they'll inspire you to think of something similar that will be cool. So basically, I know at this point, I'm like the teacher on the last day of class, and everybody's just kind of waiting for the bell to ring. Maybe some of you have planes to catch. But I just want to say thank you very much for coming to I/O. Every year, the week before, I'm always up super late and not sleeping and trying to get all this stuff done. I'm like, is this really worth it? But then I come to these events, and I talk to people who are super excited and positive and a little bit nerdy, sort of like me, and it's just really nice. It's really nice to be able to sort of chat with all of you and sort of meet other people, and please just continue to be positive and a little bit nerdy, because I think that's great. So anyway, sorry. If you want more information about Firebase, here's the website. We got a support page. We got a YouTube and a Twitter feed and all of that. And with that, I'm going to say, are we done? Are we actually done with I/O? We're done with I/O, everybody. Thank you for coming.